Coming up on today's show, Lauren Elise Rogers is a certified holistic sexuality educator and embodied intimacy and relationship coach, celebrated for her warm and approachable style. Her holistic and embodied approach to education and coaching is deeply rooted in her own pain to purpose journey. Lauren brings an empathetic and non-judgmental approach, offering practical tools that empower her clients to take ownership of their pleasure and grow in confidence and connection. She's known for creating shame-free spaces where she invites individuals and couples to navigate complex topics like long-term partnerships, consensual non-monogamy, life transitions, purity culture, and LGBTQIA+ issues. Welcome to Loving Without Boundaries, where we hear inspiring stories, share actionable advice, and talk about the challenges and the joys of ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. I'm your host, Kitty Chambliss. Coming up, my conversation with Lauren Elise Rogers. Welcome to Loving Without Boundaries, where I am really excited to be here with Lauren Elise Rogers. This is our first time meeting, and I can't wait to hear more about her story. And yeah, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have a beautiful conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Awesome. So I love being able to share your bio with our audience, but I love to also give you an opportunity to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself in your own words, if you would.
Yeah, and I think that's so rich, right? Because a story could be so many different pieces. And so, yes, my name is Lauren Elise Rogers, and I am a certified holistic sexuality educator and an embodied intimacy and relationship coach. And I always like to say, I haven't always been that way. And I grew up inside of evangelical Christianity. I was originally married at 21, was married for a decade to my now ex-husband, who is also now happily gay. And so I had an existence inside a world far, far away from understanding who I was as a sexual being, far away from understanding what sexuality and desire even were for people inside of female bodies. And so coming to this work was a life-saving tool for myself. Outside of my marriage, as I lost my community and went through a divorce, I was faced with, well, who am I now? Because if my entire worth had been wrapped up inside of this idea of being a virgin on one's wedding night and pure and chaste for your husband, no. And so that began this entire journey of my own, digging into subjects like compulsive monogamy, digging into why is it that we have structures like we do, and am I allowed to now have casual sexual encounters and still be an ethical human being? And so my own journey in this space literally led me back to school eventually to now do the work I do now. And so it's just so broad and so important and such a pain to purpose story that I'm always glad when somebody says, wait, do you want to tell us in your own words? Because this work feels so deeply important, Kitty. It feels, and I'm so thankful for the work that you do, that we need voices in this space. We need women telling these stories. We need women talking about how their desire looks different than what they were sold by society at large. And so, yeah, now it's my favorite thing to do when I work with individuals and partnerships of all kinds. And ironically, one of my niches has become individuals who are questioning, well, we did it the right way. We followed all the rules and we love each other, but now we're kind of bored out of our minds. How do we have a value and an ethic that still aligns with us, but allows us to have sexual fulfillment and flourishing long into our lives? And that has become one of my really fun niches of work. And it just makes me laugh that little Lauren at 21 years old would have cringed. And now there is more freedom, joy, pleasure, and rejoicing. And it feels almost like a redemptive story, which is so fun.
Wow. What an intro. Thank you for that. I really feel that in my heart, and I resonate a lot with everything that you shared. I'm sure we have a lot in common in that way. And I love to ask what I call your light bulb moment question. And for you, I'll position it this way. Was there a moment, and maybe it's in your adult life, but it also could be even something that happened in your childhood where you realize that maybe your journey was going to be a little bit different in some way, shape, or form. And that, maybe eventually took you to the work that you're doing today. So it could be one moment or a series of moments, but does anything come to mind?
So many. You have such great prep questions. So I've been chewing on this as I
Mhm.
prepared for our conversation today. And I think there are several, but I'll start with these two.
Mhm.
There was a moment as I was trying to get out of my marriage. My precious now ex-husband and I have a beautiful, thriving relationship, but that has taken years and
Mm.
deep, deep therapy work on both of our parts. At
Wow.
this point, when we were uncoupling, he was in complete denial. He did not know he was gay. He did not acknowledge any of this. So I was being slandered deeply. I was being told that my truth was not acceptable. I was just so many things. So there was this moment when I was sitting around a boardroom table with 5 different men in white bodies, all doubting my story. All
Mm.
of them saying, no, you may not be released from your marriage because the church doesn't see it as ethical, as
Wow.
a appropriate response. And there was this moment, light bulb moment, Kitty, where I thought, I've played by their rules. I have done it all the right way, and there is no way for me to win. I have no desire to break down this system then.
Mm.
And yet I am, you have me in your clutches. And so there was this moment of no more. There was this moment of shaking off these shackles and
Mm.
saying, I don't know where I will end up, but I know that this was all a lie. This was all a farce, is that if I followed all these rules and did things this Christian, beautiful way, that I would succeed and that I would be lauded and praised in your eyes. I have done it all the right way.
Mm.
And I've still failed you. I've still failed you. So that was a big moment of, well, what if none of this is true? What if I did monogamy? What if I did the long-suffering partnership? What if I did all of these things and was in a sexless marriage and my husband was an alcoholic and suppressing his true sexual
Mm.
identity
Mhm.
and hadn't touched me for almost a year? Something's up. When I experienced my first sexual encounter outside of marriage, and it was healing. It was beautiful. It was, might I say, holy. And it was all of these things that I had so longed for. It did not feel wrong or shameful. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel any of these things that they said I would experience. And I thought, oh, another light bulb of I was very much in choice. This was a sexual encounter of my choosing, and it felt juicy and pleasurable and good for me. Honestly, good for me, like nourishment. That was another moment. And then
Wow.
as I continued to learn and met my now partner, he had already read Ethical Slut, Sex at Dawn, this type of
Mm.
work. And when we were having these initial conversations, I was getting to share, I'm don't know if I'm interested in marriage. And does that look like with another human being to exist inside of some form of egalitarian partnership? What does it look like if monogamy is not compulsive and instead it's chosen or creative or sculpted and molded in our own way? And it set the tone for what felt a little less scripted, a little less unsure. And I like to talk to my clients about that when we're not choosing the path that so many have taken before. It can be a little scary. And yet it felt bold and courageous and like an uncharted territory that we were having to so purposefully craft
Mm.
together. And
Mm.
I thought, oh, this feels real. This feels good. This feels true. This feels responsible and accountable, that it's not just some set of rules I'm supposed to be following, which I know now are hogwash. And I can lead with my pleasure and my desire and my choice and my agency. So I think those are 3
Ooh.
light bulb moments.
Wow, those are two hugely impactful and well articulated light bulb moments. So I appreciate you taking the time to share that so eloquently. And I definitely resonate very much, certainly with the second one, because it aligns very much with my own story. So I'm curious, just to peel back some of the layers there. So when you said that that second light bulb moment started with that nourishing sexual encounter, was that a little bit more in a like a casual way? And was that even with your now partner? Was it somebody else? I'm curious.
Someone completely else. Casual encounter, has
Hmm.
gone on to become a great friend, which is
Oh, wow.
even sweeter in this whole thing. And my
Mm.
now partner, husband, knows him. And again, right, when we can dismantle this idea of being property to someone, it opens up so
Yes.
many routes of beautiful communication. No, but it was just casual and was built upon mutual attraction, which we can get into. I had been so indoctrinated to believe that I needed to push men away who were truly interested in me sexually,
Hmm.
and that purity was such an important thing. So this was my first interaction that was based upon leading with my desire and acknowledging that perhaps my desires were good, that perhaps my heart was not deceitful above all things, which is a verse out of the Christian scriptures that I had been
Oh.
indoctrinated with, that perhaps my heart, my wants were good, and that it might lead to some unmet expectations or hopes, right? Because I had equated for so long this idea that when we had sex with someone, it equaled partnership with someone. So there was 100% uncoupling that still needed to happen in my own understanding of what sex could be. And yet, as you said, this pleasurable, juicy encounter was fleeting, was passing, did happen several times with this human being, and yet each one was nourishing and showed me what I was still yet looking for. And it started me on to this beautiful, now I understand to be a polyamorous ethic, that it wasn't until recent times that one person was supposed to be your best friend and your lover and all of these things. Um, and so it really let me see the beauty in this human who wasn't interested in providing partnership for me, but was very interested in providing juicy and pleasurable sexual encounters. And was that okay? Was that enough? And could I be present in that moment enough and see that human for the beauty of that time? And instead of expecting one person to be everything. So it was
Hmm.
so instrumental in where I
Wow,
am
that's amazing.
now. That one encounter.
Yeah, that's mind blowing. It sounds like it sounds like it was
Mhm.
also mind blowing sex, which is great.
It was great.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple questions from that. Just in a timeline, was that roughly in maybe your early 30s or so?
Right? And it's so good of you to ask this, right? Because I love looking at timelines on this.
Hmm.
Yes, I did married at 21. I was 33,
Okay.
33, 30. I'm
Hmm.
about to turn 40. Tried to do the math. I was divorced in 2019. This was October 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so mid 30s.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's interesting. I just think it's fascinating to just kind of look at it over the course of that timeline. That's around the time that I met my now husband on Match.com. I was about
My now
34.
husband on Match.com.
Oh,
I did
really?
too. Yes,
Oh,
yes,
that's so
yes.
fascinating. Yeah, I met him. It was July of 2003. So I was 34 at the time and he was 33. So
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
that's
I mean,
fascinating. And that was
very
before,
sweet.
at that time for me, that was before I knew what the word polyamory was.
Mhm,
So yeah,
mhm. Yep, I think
fascinating.
was I no, I had not started school yet. I might not have known what the term
Hmm.
itself was as well. I don't think I would have been able to define it at all. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even know what it was. I was familiar with what an open relationship was, but at that moment in time for me, it wasn't on my radar. I don't know how much, I know you've been listening to my podcast, so I don't know if you know a little bit about my story, but I raised Catholic, I joke around, I'm a recovering Catholic now, which isn't so much of a joke. And I was a serial cheating monogamist because I just didn't understand how to live my life without having overlapping partners, because I thought if you have to have one and only for the rest of your life and they have to be everything to you, then that's a big deal. So I felt like I was almost auditioning people for the role. And so anytime somebody seemed a little bit better, I would kind of leapfrog and I wouldn't quite go until I tested them out. And so when I met my now husband on Match.com, as we started to fall in love, I was just honest with him. And I said, look, I've cheated on every single person I've ever been with, essentially. I don't want to do that to you. I'm sick and tired of that game that I've been playing, but I don't know what that looks like. And he said something similar. I won't tell his story. And we just, like you, we just started to get creative and be honest and open every step of the way. So we were exclusive for the first few years. Somebody introduced us to the book Ethical Slut, which was the first time I saw the word polyamory in print, as well as something I'd said out loud but never saw in print, that sex is fun and pleasure is good for you. And I was like, oh my gosh. It's it right here in black and white. That's so freeing and liberating to get to see that. And it sounds like our stories are in many ways in alignment with each other. So I think that's fascinating.
No, it brings tears to my eyes, Kitty. That is almost identically what my now partner husband told me when we first met, was that he had cheated on every previous partner and was never interested in doing it again. And,
wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's fascinating. Just wild how the phraseology that you both used was so honest and true and refreshing. I'm sure your husband felt the same of, and so now what? Right? And I think that's so, if I may, it just so is why it is such a piece of my work now, is that I think if we can get to this, so now what? Piece. I always tell clients of mine, even if they are not choosing to experiment or choose ethical non-monogamy, even if they are not interested in being fully polyamorous and having metamors inside of their relationships, they owe it to themselves to deconstruct what it is that we have all compulsively fallen into in our monogamous relationship structures. Because for most of us, we don't believe that we're property of our spouse anymore. I would say that most of us have fallen away from that. And yet we are still behaving as though we are so often. It affects, as I'm sure countless guests have talked about, jealousy and all of these things. And we do have people being secretive and deceitful behind the scenes, which I always tell my clients, it's not sex that harms other people. It's deceit. It is secrecy. It is not being a person of your word. And I'm sorry, call me crazy, but choosing to be ethically non-monogamous is far more honorable than lying to someone who you have said that you will be true to. And so that has just really been a fascinating study to me of, wait, what if it is far more ethical to consider the humanity of all these people around us, and then get to share with one another what forms of partnership we're interested in providing, what type of monogamy we are interested in. I view it kind of as like a salad bar approach, right? There are many different things that are right for us depending on the season, depending on Jessica Fern's term saturation that we experience. I deal with a lot of folks who have young children at home. Is a very busy and saturated season of life. And so it might not be the time when you are engaging in multiple sexual encounters with multiple people. And yet you can still have broken apart the old patriarchal structure of monogamy. Because, as I'm sure you have found and found in yourself, so many women have been lied to that we are not sexual beings, right? That we're the ones who are bored with a headache, right? No, not tonight, honey. I've got a headache. I always tell my clients that I don't think it's that you're not interested in sex. I think it's that you're not interested in that sex. And I think it's that lots of women, yes, would love to have various partners. We just can't believe that we could be those ones. And when we start to erase the old narratives and chase the one like you were of, well, wait a second, what if I do desire? Then whether or not it's creative monogamy, which is Dr. Jolie Hamilton's term that I love to use, and it is just in the fantasy world. It's in the shared dialogue with your partner. But we can acknowledge that we are women who want. Well, then this changes the story. And then it starts to be this partnership based upon, again, an egalitarian system, not a you're my property and you should have sex with me because you are wife. And like, this is just not serving anyone.
Right, right. Yeah. Well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. So I'm curious. So once you started that journey, what would you say once you started to, reclaim your desire, your pleasure, realize that, hey, what I've been told is not my truth, and really started to step into that? What were maybe some of the challenges that you experienced along the way, and how did you eventually overcome those?
I'm so glad you asked, because this was the largest for me. I had to really work on internalized misogyny, my internalized hatred of other women, Kitty.
Oh, wow.
Growing up in a world in which men were better and women were the temptresses and the sluts, I had to do extreme work on women not being my competition.
Wow.
It was the hardest work I've ever done. Because if I was a woman who desired and wanted, well, that meant that there was a whole world of women who wanted the same. So then I had to sit with that of, well, now that my partner could be with anyone, are all women in the world my competition? Am I needing to be the best in order to be chosen? Do I need to out-attract? Do I need to outperform? Do I need to just be the sexiest, the smartest, the most talented to constantly keep my partner coming back to me? And it was such a beautiful journey into an understanding of, again, ethical, aligned polyamory, into to choose partnership can come with choosing guidelines and parameters. That is not claiming my partner, right? That is not making him not go out there and choose the more sexy one. And I got to truly learn to love other women in a way that I never imagined that I could. To celebrate their desires and view them as women who are desirable, and to celebrate their attractiveness. And people think it's wild, but my husband and I often discuss the beauty, the talent, the sexiness of our friends all the time. This is a thing that I want him to feel such freedom to do. And it's just the best thing it is. Again, it's so funny to have come out of Christianity, right? This place that I was supposed to love others so deeply as Christ loved the church, right? All of these types of things. Right. And I'm like, joke's on them. I love people much more deeply now than I ever did, inside a system that taught me that women were a gateway to the devil. And this, my biggest lesson was needing to really work on my internalized misogyny.
Wow, that was not what I was expecting you to say. Not that I had an expectation, but that's fascinating. That's why I love to have these conversations, right? The more voices and stories we can share, it helps normalize the conversation and open up the door to have these delicate but freeing revelations about your journey and my journey and everyone else that I get the privilege to talk to and to interview. And I'd love to ask this question, which is, we can hear these stories and think, oh, that's great. They just, had this big epiphany and now everything's lovely. And, so, and maybe it happened overnight. There can maybe be that sort of a reaction. So I'd love to ask, and I'll share a little bit about myself, like how long would you say that working on that internalized misogyny took you? And I can share just from my standpoint, being a recovering Catholic, it took me decades to release some of those sex negative narratives. So I'm curious, like how long, if you had to guess, would you say that that particular journey of releasing the internalized misogyny took you, and how much work did you have to do, partly so that our listeners understand that it's not like you just wake up one day and it's all better,
It's not.
Yeah.
If anyone could have seen my face when
Yes.
he was going, I was like, oh my goodness, no. It is such hard work. I love to give my clients this illustration because this is truly what helped me. So the Reverend Beverly Dale has this incredible book called Advancing Sexual Health for the Christian Client. And I highly recommend it for anyone out there who is a recovering Catholic or coming from an evangelical situation, anywhere where there were sex negative scripts. Because she equates it to us having these sexual gardens that were planted without our consent from the time of infancy until we awaken one morning, realizing that we want to do some gardening. And so there are some sex negative beliefs that existed in my body and in my mind that were explicit negative beliefs. They were just plucked out, saw the weed, plucked it out. Then there were some beliefs that were latent, almost like the roots got under the ground. And like a dandelion, couldn't get it out as much. But with some reading, with some enlightenment, with podcasts, with coaches and that type of thing, they worked their way out of the soil, almost like tilling the soil. Then Reverend Beverly Dale says, then there are body-based sex negative beliefs that she equates to soil blight. And I would say that this internalized misogyny of mine was like sick soil. And so I would love to sit here when are we recording? April of 2025, and tell you that the internalized misogyny that I located in my body around 2019 was all gone. But that would not be true. I will still feel, and this is what I encourage clients to do and anyone who listens to this podcast to do, there will be times when I see, someone who I can tell my partner's attracted to, and I will feel a little ping in my belly. A little gut reaction. And now I know her. I know that body-based piece. And I have tools now to say, oh, Lauren, that woman is not your competition. Let's celebrate her attractiveness, her desirability. Let's celebrate that your partner chooses partnership with you, and that doesn't mean that anyone else needs to be unattractive. And yet, I do think that these things work through our bodies. I like to say, if I was inside of a system for 30 plus years, I get to take 30 plus years to let this work out of me. It does not need to be my burden to feel ashamed and guilty that this is a thing that is taking a while to wash out of my system. I like to say, like a good farmer knows how to treat soil blight. He puts manure down on the soil. He lets it rest. He gets it sunlight and water, doesn't plant any new crops for a while. And there's just a gentleness with which I approach it now. And I think conversations like this, to your earlier point, are so important, because I also think the more we talk about it and say, hey, this is something that I struggle with, is one of the pathways to healing. So no, I think I would be not telling the truth if I didn't say that I can still feel sometimes. I'm literally, for anyone who's listening, I can feel it in my belly. There's a certain place in my belly. We have a saying, a pit in my stomach. Mm-hmm. It is not a pit anymore. It's more like a yes. Does that answer the question? I think that's
it
such
does.
A beautiful
Yeah.
question.
No, I think that was really a beautiful explanation, and thanks for sharing that resource as well with our listeners, because there's definitely a lot of religious trauma, or just helping understand that it's a journey.
Yes.
And it's not. It can, like you said, it can also be a lifelong journey. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we get to, right? I think in this culture, especially over here in America, we love instant gratification. We love to just be better. And I am just far more interested in us being human, of us getting the time to work through these things, of being honest and truthful about what didn't work and what we're working on now, instead of feeling that we need to go from one culture that celebrated facades to another. I think inside of school, one of the most beautiful things I learned was the difference between accidents and violations, and that humans who are aware that they might accidentally harm one another at certain times are actually some of the safest people to be around. And I want to be that kind of human. I want to be the kind of human in this second half, maybe longer, but I think second half of my life, who is okay with her humanity, and that there's some things that we're still working through. And we get that time.
That's beautiful. And I love what you said there. I want to just tease that out a little bit more. Can you talk a little bit more about the difference between accidents versus violations? That was fascinating.
Yes. So this credit all goes to our BDSM and kink founders, the people who have been in these spaces, curious about play and exploration and healing and pleasure and desire and pain and joy, all commingling, right? And what they found was there is a clear difference between someone who comes into a space intending to violate, someone who takes advantage, who seeks to harm for their pleasure. There is a distinction between that and someone who comes into a space and accidentally causes harm to another, perhaps because of something they didn't even know about. Any of us who have trauma in our past will sometimes experience a trigger of a source wound of our trauma. And it is not always the intent of the person we are playing with or in a conversation with to harm us. That is not always their intent. It might have been an accident. And so BDSM and kink colleagues of mine would teach that what is most important here are tools for repair. And that in this cancel culture that we have developed here in the United States of America, we'll be so quick to just label someone off as someone who harms. And please hear me, when someone comes in with an intent to harm, an intent to violate, they absolutely should be removed from spaces, removed from our lives, if they are not interested in doing the work to repair and to take accountability and to become a better person and get training and healing and blah, blah, blah. No, I am not speaking of those folks. But sometimes we have an accident of relational wounding or physical wounding. And there are tools and questions and accountability that we can take as the one who harmed, and we can take as the one who was harmed, that help lead to collective repair as individuals, as families, and as communities. And I am just so interested in this. So I give myself some questions, and I can totally throw them out if that sounds good.
Sure.
That look like, wow, I am sorry that I have hurt you. I did not mean to or intend to. Is there anything I can do in this moment to help support you? I have seen that I've hurt you. This is another phrasing. And I will be taking these steps to work on this accident. Is there anything that else I can do to support you? I can see that you're hurting. Would you like to tell me, did something come up during this encounter, during this argument, that I can hear and hold space for you? It just starts to generate this healing dialogue, this acknowledgement that, again, we all have lived experiences, and that for those in polyamorous relationships, for instance, something in one of your partnerships or one of your sexual encounters may have triggered a wound from another one, and that's okay. We get to have all these different relational experiences. We just need, I believe, tools to have these communicative conversations between one another.
Beautiful. And I am wholeheartedly in alignment with that whole concept as well. That's I love how you describe the difference between when we can, have an accidental harm versus when there is malicious intent, and being able to tease that distinction apart, and then using the tools to create healing with partners who are interested in accountability and interested in healing, right?
That part.
Yeah, because that's something to tease out too, and to notice. And we might look at somebody and say, hey, they look harmless, they look kind, but it really comes down to, but are they willing to be lovingly, respectfully held accountable, and are they interested in healing and repair and doing the work to do so? Because again, that doesn't happen by a magic wand either.
No, no. And, it's fine. This would actually be a good question for you, Kitty. So I find that, folks who have done the work to really consider ethical non-monogamy, who have read, who have researched, who are longtime listeners of your podcast, who have practiced, who have tooled themselves up, right, can have a great tool belt. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you find this or you've seen this. I am noticing that they can project onto other partners that partner has also done the same work. That this person that they desire to have sexy time with, which good on you, has also tooled themselves up. And it is something that I have just found my clients and I talking about a lot recently, of this well-meaning projection. This, oh, well, I've done this work, so of course they have too. Do you ever witness anything like this?
Yes, I'm glad that you said that. And I also think there's even one other, I think that's true, that we can project that, and just, we want to, it's also, I think, healthy to want to give the other person the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. And it's also important to then also look at reality, as much as you can, or ask the right questions. But another distinction, I'll say kind of in the middle, is I think that somebody could think they did the work. Like they could watch the videos, they could read a book, but if they're not actually putting those tools into practice, like the example I give is, you can see a hammer on a table and somebody can say, this hammer is gorgeous. It's perfectly made. It can absolutely do the job. And here's a video of the hammer. But if they don't actually pick up the hammer and then practice using it, then you don't actually know how to use those tools, So you can have a pretty tool belt. It can look nice, but if you haven't actually put those tools into practice, or the other obvious example is going to the gym. You can have the coach that's telling you the tools and the exercises and and all the different, circuit training that you need to do, but you've got to actually go do those exercises and practice that in order to build the muscle, So I think there's also that distinction of just watching some videos or just reading a book isn't enough either. Like you've got to actually put it all into practice and make the mistakes. There's going to be mistakes that happen. Yeah.
There's got to be grace and just such compassion for those at that stage of their journey. And that is why I think having these tools to repair accidents, right? If you are, yes, new to the construction field and you got your shiny little tool belt, you're going to want to be on the job site with people whom are more practiced, master carpenters. You're going to want to have those people in your corner. And it is okay. It is a natural part of the learning experience. In fact, I don't know about you, but I learn best through my mistakes. I think they've been my greatest teachers. They have been the thing that has given me my most precious lessons. I don't want to rob anyone of that. And yet we get to be honest about where we are in our journeys. And sometimes that's with new tools. That's being the new gym person who doesn't really know how to use the Stairmaster yet and might fall off. And it is better to be honest about that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's also sexy, right? When somebody's, honest and falling in a space of integrity with themselves and their own word, I find that attractive, desirable, and sexy, right?
Same. Because you are safer to play with. Whether it is a relational realm or a sexual realm or an emotional realm, if you have the self-awareness to say, this is where I am, then it is going to kind of shatter projections that I might be trying to put on you. And then we can co-collaborate with our skill sets and where we are.
Mhm.
And yes, agreed. I think that is highly sexy.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So I'd love to ask also, where would you, and I'm loving this conversation and just how honest and open you are and how articulate you are as well. I'd love to ask you, where would you say you're currently at on your journey? And I'll ask this from two different directions, and you can answer in any order, both professionally, because we can talk about that, like where your work is now, or and also personally. So however you'd like to answer that question of where you currently are.
Such a beautiful question. Back to my little salad bar analogy. I think after attempting something one way, again, we were just speaking to mistakes. That didn't go so well. My first marriage. That didn't go so well. And I followed scripts and I tried to persevere and, really die to the self is a phrase we'll use inside of Christian spaces. I really tried to die to the self. I'm not interested in that anymore. I'm now interested personally and I'd say professionally, so there's a little overlap here, in informed decision-making, in acknowledging that as a human being still developing, my interests, my likes, my desires continually change, as I'm sure every single person listening to this podcast understands. I'm growing. I'm evolving. I long to have the permission to make ethical and consensual, informed decisions till the end of my days about my body and the bodies of others. What I desire for my clients to be able to do is very similar. To be able to look at this salad bar that includes things like attachment and wounds that we might have from infancy that maybe should be addressed before we're going and slinging our sexy selves out into the world. There's some stuff we got to do sometimes that is actually more ethical as we engage with other bodies. And then I'm also here I have many clients who will come to me interested in some form of non-monogamy and spend several sessions with me, maybe several months, and then go, no, I think we're actually really good in chosen monogamy. Great. I think that sometimes a form of monogamy, maybe monogamish, right? Dan Savage's word, is good for lots of us.
Yeah.
What I think is always going to be harmful is feeling that we have no choice. Good old Betty Dodson says that the first principle of pleasure is the freedom of personal choice. And if, as human beings, we are walking around feeling that we are stuck, I think our pleasure is going to be one of the first things to go. Personally and professionally, I'm not interested in stuckness. I'm not interested in it has to be. Or, well, since I chose that when I first got married, there's no renegotiation. Phooey. Phooey, phooey. I think that even folks inside of very long-term partnerships have, and would be honest with you and tell you, have had different relationship containers throughout that entire long marriage. And I think that that is healthy and good and lovely, that we get to rewrite our scripts. We get to edit our stories. And again, when we're in some form of chosen relational container, I think that all parties get to be involved in that decision. And so is it trickier? Yes. And yet, as one who was on the inside of compulsive monogamy, I can tell you that was unhappy too. That was miserable as well. So this idea that, monogamy is the better way, I just say phooey to. It's not. People are not happier. They are cheating in some capacity. They are denying their own pleasures. They are having obligatory sex. They are having, unsatisfying sexual encounters. So, yeah, does that answer your question? Choice, a salad bar.
It does. Yeah, I think
informed
it's beautiful.
decision making. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was very beautifully answered. And I love, the nuance of noticing that there we can have this, we're fed a script around monogamy. Like that is compulsory. It's the human universal, and that's the only way that we can be in a healthy relationship. But look at how many of those don't end well, or people are miserable, or it's sexless, like you said. And we can get creative about how we move in the world, whether that's new monogamy, creative monogamy, monogamish, ethical non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy, all of everything in between, polyamory, relationship anarchy. Like there's so many different ways to exist. And we don't have a lot of good role models. And that's where working with somebody like yourself or myself, who is trained, who's been in the trenches. And like you said, like you can be, if you want somebody who's standing shoulder to shoulder, who really has your best interest at heart, to hold that space for you and to say, hey, okay, so you fell down. That's all right. That's how you learn. Let's get back up again. I'm right here,
Yes. Yes. Well, and it goes back to our analogy of, a new individual on a construction site
hmm
standing with
Right.
the foreman, right? Standing with others who are doing, have done. We there are so many examples that we have in the world of learning a new trade and then going out and practicing this trade, and there would be no shame in it. It would be
Exactly.
celebrated. And
hmm
yet, yes, I want everyone to know, Kitty's here. I'm here. There are so many incredible individuals out there now who would love to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. I use that I tell my clients I like to link arms with them as they're headed into the
Exactly.
woods, right?
hmm
Like, let's go and let's create some new neural pathways. This is a lot of new script creation, a lot of new information that we
hmm
deserve to know, but that can be overwhelming at times. And so it can be so lovely to work with someone who culls down that information too for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Because there's also so much information out there. That's true. When
Yeah.
I started my journey back on this consensual non-monogamy path back in, that would have been around 2004, 2005, there was hardly any books. The Ethical Slut was one of the only books
Yes.
out there. And now there's so much information. That's wonderful, but it can also be completely overwhelming. Yeah.
Completely. Completely. It's interesting. Within my model of education and coaching, I follow often this PLICIT model, and PLICIT stands for permission, then limited information, which I always find is like, yes, and then specific suggestions, and then intensive therapy. So that could be this coaching work that I do and educating work, or referring you out. Because
Mm,
sometimes, and I'm sure you've seen this too, once we get inside breaking open the container and getting away from compulsive monogamy, we discover some root traumas inside of people's stories, and those deserve attention. And sometimes that's with me, or sometimes that's with a trauma specialist. And yeah, I always say, like, you deserve to be looked at as a whole human. You are a
yes.
whole human. And this body that we have even casual sexual encounters with has stories, has things that it believes, and it deserves to be seen.
So beautiful. Really felt that. So before we start to wrap up, I'd love to just ask, what are you really excited about with your work, or what's maybe a message that you want to leave our listeners that you feel would be beneficial to them?
This just bubbled up. This was not something I had prepared for, but I'm really excited about this work that you're doing and I'm doing, leading to a more compassionate and loving world. I think that when the World Health Organization says that sexual health is fundamental to the well-being of individuals, families, and communities, they are not wrong. I think that each of us has a right and responsibility to know and celebrate the sexual values that we want to live by, whatever those may be. And I think that when we do this work, be it monogamy or consensual non-monogamy or polyamory, what that can, if we let it, enable us to do is love those around us more deeply, have more empathy for those who are not yet to a space where they can do this work yet, to have greater understanding and compassion for those who might be choosing a different variance of relationship dynamic. And that, I deeply believe, can heal the world.
Mm, So beautiful. So beautiful. Well, I've deeply enjoyed this conversation, Lauren, and I'd love to make sure that folks know where to get a hold of you. So if people want to learn more about your work or reach out to you, where can they do that?
If anything I said today resounded in your belly, you can go to sexedforyou.com/free consult. And I'd love to offer you a free 15-minute time for us to chat. If you're like, oh, something she said just really rang true with me, please go. Please tell me you heard me on Kitty's podcast. If you just want to get to know me a little bit better, you can actually hear my partner and I talk. We have a partnership podcast. So the partnership podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the good places. And we talk about so many of these things in our own personal journey. I also have a Sex Ed for You podcast, just the name of my business, Sex Ed for You. And that's more for individuals who are dating and want to have great sex. I'm also on Instagram, very active. That's the only social media platform that I'm active on. And that you're going to have to type in because they like to shadow ban sexuality educators like me. And you can go to sex_ed_for_you. And if you don't type it all in, you might not find me because on any given day, they like to hide me. But again, sex_ed_for_you. And there you'll see me on Instagram stories, but a lot of educational content as well. If you go to my website as well, sexedforyou.com, there's a lot of free resources, free handouts, those types of things, and have fun poking around. And yeah, feel free to send me a DM. Again, tell me that you enjoyed this conversation, and I'd love to hear from you.
That's beautiful. Awesome. Well, I've deeply enjoyed this interview, this conversation with you, creating this show with you. So I want to thank you for reaching out to me. Thank you for your time, and keep doing the work that you're doing. I deeply appreciate your work and knowing that you are out there in the world supporting our wider community as well, making the world a sexier, healthier, better place.
Same.
If you enjoy the Loving Without Boundaries podcast, I know you'll also love the Open Nesters podcast with my friends Tessa and Amir, a poly couple with 3 adult kids, together for 36 years and open almost 25 of those. The Open Nesters podcast not only explores open relating, but opening to our best act of life. Act 3, where adult kids are getting ready to leave the nest and we get to reimagine life on our terms. Visit theopennesters.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Yours in the opening.